In Climate Watch, a new CBS News poll shows most Americans think the issue of climate change is something that needs to be addressed now. 56% of Americans think action on climate change is an urgent issue compared to 18% who said it does not need to be addressed. The polling also found that many people consider climate change to be a crisis.
Our polling also revealed that most Americans think climate change contributes to extreme weather events, including melting ice in the Arctic, warmer summers, forest fires, and more. CBS News is joining 250 news organizations who are committing to a week of climate coverage leading up to the UN's Climate Summit on September 23rd.
CBS News contributing meteorologist Jeff Berardelli joins us now to break down everything you need to know about climate change. So explain to our viewers, when they hear the words climate change, what should they be thinking about? What does it exactly refer to?
Right. So we're releasing all these, greenhouse gases due to our burning of fossil fuels. And the more CO2 and methane that we put into the atmosphere, the more that blanket kind of thickens. You got to think of it as almost a blanket because carbon dioxide and methane absorb heat in the atmosphere. So the more of it, the thicker the comforter or the thicker the blanket, the more of it gets reflected back down to the earth and heats us up. A lot of that is actually being stored in the oceans, which is good and it's bad. About 93% of that excess heat gets stored in the oceans. It's good because otherwise we'd be on fire up here in the air. But it also stores that energy to be released another day. And sometimes that's released in the form of extreme weather like hurricanes or other weather phenomena. It will come back to haunt us. It is already, and it will continue. It's just kind of storing all that energy. Unfortunately, at some point, it will come back to haunt us.
I think, some people who hear this, climate change have also heard global warming, and then it's not global warming.
Yeah.
I know this is sort of basic, but why did it go from what we use, the phrase we used, global warming, to climate change?
So, to be honest with you, and I've heard various versions of how this came to be.
Yeah.
One of them is Frank Luntz, the Republican strategist.
Right.
Somewhere around 20 years ago or so, told the Republican Party that climate change was less scary than global warming, and they should start making it climate change. But actually, the truth is that's a little bit more of an accurate name anyway.
Right.
Because not everybody warms, but overall the globe is warming. But climate change is what's happening. There are different aspects that are changing in the climate. So either one is true. And when I write articles on it, I go back and forth in sentences between global warming and climate change. But a lot of folks now want climate crisis or climate emergency. For certain reasons, there are crises right now. Climate is causing crisis, but not in every instance. In some instances it is, in some instances it isn't. So whatever you call it, it all refers back to the same thing, which is that humans are we become a force of nature, and we're forcing the climate now.
So here's a question that a lot of people, naysayers, will have. They'll say, look, this is just the natural evolution of the planet. This is something that is naturally occurring, and it has nothing to do with the greenhouse gases and the manufacturing and the CO2 that we as humans are pumping into the atmosphere. What do you say to that?
It's very hard to convince people whose ideology is to not believe it. There's so much scientific evidence. I mean, literally, if we started piling up the scientific evidence on this table, it would probably go out into outer space at this point. That's how much scientific proof there is. There's a paper that came out last year that now that this particular paper says that we have reached the gold standard in evidence, meaning there's only a 1 in a million, the gold standard in scientific evidence. It's hard to get to. There's only a 1 in a million chance that it's not caused by humans. Just to give you an idea of how certain scientists are, the scientific consensus is over 97%. It's probably closer to 99% among climate scientists who study this all the time. So there is no debate in scientific circles. Unfortunately, politicians have kind of thrown this monkey wrench in with this information about it not being real. It's confused the situation. But it's not what the scientific community thinks.
Are those politicians getting their information from other scientists who may have a different hypothesis?
There are like 7 of them.
7. Okay. I just wanted to clear that up for people.
There might not be exactly 7, but the point is there are very few, and it's always the same scientists, and a lot of them are unfortunately on the payroll of certain groups that are paying them.
Yeah.
It's important to point that out.
There are legitimate scientists who doubt how strong the influence of humans are. There's something called the equilibrium climate sensitivity. It sounds really wonky, right? But basically, it's just if you were to double the amount of carbon dioxide, how much warming would you see? the range is somewhere between 1.5 and 3.5 degrees Celsius, which is about double that in Fahrenheit almost. The scientists who tend to believe that it's not real or maybe less real are on the 1.5 end of the spectrum. And those are legitimate scientists who kind of question the reality of climate change. Anyone who's going lower than 1.5, I think it's probably not genuine. It's disingenuous to some degree.
We heard Elizabeth Warren, speaking of politicians at a town hall, say, it's not about straws and light bulbs. Right. And I think a lot of times people sort of become disheartened when they try to think about what they can do to contribute to reversing this problem. Yeah. And if it's not about straws and light bulbs, or maybe it is, then what is it about?
So it is about straws and light bulbs to some small degree because this is not a straw. I thought it was a straw.
How dare you? I would never have a straw.
So the reason why I say it kind of is because when you form one good green habit, like not drinking out of a non-reusable plastic bottle, I think if you can form that habit over the course of enough weeks or months, it kind of pushes you to the next habit, like shutting off your lights when you leave. Shutting off your lights is something. It's all something. Next thing you know, you're buying a hybrid or electric car. Maybe you're eating meat less because you realize that's not good for the environment. It's also not good for the animals who get killed because you're eating them. So eventually it leads to better habits. And if it leads to better habits within your family, it rubs off on your family, your friends. That's what we need, is kind of a mindset change, a lifestyle change, a society change. And that's what happens with almost any trend. It needs to be a sustainable trend, but trends come up often and they come up fast, and all of a sudden a society is transformed. So we need that transformation. So I would say the little things do matter. The bigger things are much more important. We should talk about those too.
Well, so I think it's a great point, because often the message that comes generally from lobbyists and from politicians and from major corporations is that you, meaning the individual, is responsible for reversing the changes.
Stop drinking all that bottled water.
Stop drinking all that bottled water. Stop
Right.
using those straws.
Right.
When in fact the reality is that most of the CO2 that's being dumped into the air is produced by these organizations, by these companies, and some of these countries. That's China and other countries.
Absolutely.
And they're making it seem as if it's up to you. Right. And in fact, humans have come a long way. This country has come a long way from even when I was a kid, when campaigns started around littering. We've gotten better at shutting off the water, turning off lights, recycling, and yet the planet keeps warming. So it's not just individuals, it's these companies.
It's both, right? So we have to take responsibilities to hold these people accountable, right? To hold corporations and politicians accountable. That is on us to some degree. So some of this is on us. But the other aspect is, the government right now is in a complete stalemate. Stalemate. They're not doing a stalemate.
Right.
Pretty much the same.
We understood. Yeah.
Right. I mean, actually, they are the same. Not much is happening. So it is on them as well. Here's what we need to understand. Renewable energy like solar and wind is not only good for the environment, it's unbelievably good for our economy. It's creating jobs in places, middle America, that were losing jobs and people just weren't coming back. Kids or young adults would leave their towns and never come back. They can come back now. The U.S. government estimates that the two fastest growing occupations in the United States over the next 10 years will be solar technician, number one, wind technician, number two. China right now invests twice as much into renewable energy than we do. If we want to remain an economic superpower and continue to be able to beat China, this is an area that we need to win. The future of energy undoubtedly is clean, renewable energy, and this is great for our economy. If we don't do it now, we're going to end up losing ground. So, if you don't care about the environment, that is fine. You probably care about the economy, and that's why we need to move forward fast.
So, Jeff, if we do everything right, let's say, right, will it bring us to the point where we're slowing the progression, or can we reverse things?
They can both happen. First, we need to slow it. It's kind of like a cruise ship, right? It takes a little while to slow it down and turn it around.
Right.
Then we can kind of stop it, put the brakes on it. Reversing it requires trees and technology. I say that because we need to suck the carbon dioxide back out of the atmosphere. Trees can help with that. So planting trees in your backyard will help.
I saw something about
everybody.
If we planted 1 trillion trees. Is that true?
Yes,
that we could probably...
it would mitigate some of it, would help some of it. That helps. But also technology called carbon capture. Now, it's in its infancy. There are a couple of carbon capture plants in the United States. The problem is what do you do with that carbon dioxide? It's a bit pie in the sky. They're pumping it underground. But if they can't come up with a business model of people who want to buy carbon dioxide, it may not be sustainable. Also, you need hundreds of thousands of these carbon capture plants all over the world. It's incredibly expensive. So that is what we're banking on, but it may not be realistic. However, yes, if we can get to the point where carbon capture is efficient, inexpensive, we can suck that carbon dioxide back out of the atmosphere and reverse things. But first we have to slow it and stop it.
Wow, really interesting stuff. Jeff, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff.